Iman, how are we doing today?
Pretty good, Eric. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Welcome to the Intrinsic Podcast.
Thank
It's good to
you.
chat. Yeah, it's nice to chat
Yeah,
again.
definitely.
Um,
When we first linked up, we figured out both of our logos have the yin yang incorporated. So I was like, we got
oh
to make
yeah,
something happen. We got to get on the podcast together.
yeah, there it is. That's that head and tail, the serpent. I like
Yep.
it. Yeah, yeah, sweet. So, well, let's get right into it. So, you're a leader in the weight loss and metabolism space for helping people, keep it off. Is we set a goal to lose like 10 pounds, and then we're motivated temporarily to achieve that goal, and then before you know it, we're gaining another 20 on top of that. So, what's your just at a high level? I know you're integrated as well, so you have lived experiences through this. Give us a little high level overview of your specialties and what you've been through to come into this health and wellness world.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share my story, and it ties into the reason why I approach weight loss the way I do. So, I grew up with an alcoholic parent, so I'm sure some of your listeners will resonate with that, coming from the addiction space. And many people who either struggle with addiction or, are close to someone who struggle with addiction, they understand this sort of need for control. And because there's such a lack of control, right? So as a kid, having a parent who was an alcoholic meant that my family life was very chaotic. It wasn't in my control. Things did not feel normal for me as a kid. And, we internalized that lack of control. In fact, I was just onboarding a new client yesterday, and she told me the same thing. She said, Iman, I was the skinniest when my husband was struggling with alcoholism because I couldn't control our family life at all, but I could control my food. And that's what I was grasping onto. And so I was super restrictive with my food. And that's, obviously it wasn't a healthy relationship with food, which I'm sure we can get into later. But I tell you that story to tell you like there's this need for something to be going all right, something to be going okay. And so I kind of started developing that need and that kind of desire for some sort of order in my world when I left for college. Things were really bad back home. And I wasn't even there to, be a part of it or help my family through it. And I started developing a really weird relationship with food where I would use food as a coping mechanism. So, we all have heard of the freshman 15, that kind of first semester of college where you have access to a bunch of fast food on campus and the dining hall, which the quality of food there is horrible. So, like many people do, I gained about 15 to 20 pounds my first semester of college. And I remember coming home from my first year at the University of Florida and just feeling awful in my body. I mean, I was, again, 20 pounds heavier. I was confused because lifted weights regularly. I jogged, I was on the treadmill, but I just wasn't, my body composition was awful. And it's because I was eating so much and so much poor quality food. So I kind of had this mentality of, well, I work out really hard. I need to fuel my workouts and stuff like that. And I was fueling it with just a bunch of junk constantly. And so, I did what most young women do. And I was like, okay, well, I feel fat and I feel ugly. So I'm going to get this weight off. So I went to YouTube. And at the time, fitness influencers weren't really on social media as much. They were more so on YouTube. And I kind of just searched up in the YouTube search bar, how to lose weight. And what was really, really popular during that time was the whole if it fits your macros approach. So macros are specific nutrients that make up our foods, proteins, fats, and carbs. And basically what all these YouTubers were saying was you can eat whatever you want as long as you eat a small enough amount of it that you are in a caloric deficit, which means you are burning more calories than what you are consuming. So I started tracking my food religiously using an app called MyFitnessPal, which some of your listeners might be familiar with. And when I set up the app, my profile on the app, they give you options and it's like, I want to lose weight, I want to gain weight, I want to whatever. So of course I clicked the button that says like lose weight as fast as possible because I was just so just unhappy in my body and felt unconfident and it was a disaster, right? So what it did was based on my height and weight and that aggressive goal I had, it assigned me a caloric goal of 1200 calories. So
Oh, wow.
for a really long time, I was eating 1,200 calories a day, very little carbs. It was like, half of an apple was pretty much all the carbs I would let myself eat in a day. It was actually, looking back on it, I still have the logs, believe it or not. It was high protein, low fat, and low carb. So I was basically just eating protein and like vegetables, and that was it. And I lost weight. I lost like 20 pounds over the course of that summer. I was home in between my freshman and sophomore year of college, but I set myself up for a world of hurt after that. So I lost my period, which is very common when the female body goes under a lot of stress. Some of the athletes in your audience might have experience with that as well. I started developing orthorexia, which is this idea that food has to be perfect, it has to be clean in order for you to eat it. And I got really depressed and really anxious, and my whole world was just centered around food. If I eat this, it'll make me fat. If I don't eat within this period of time, I'll get fat. Like, it was just a disaster. And it took me years of therapy, trial and error, kind of exposing myself to new foods, unhealthy foods. Like, even to this day, I still struggle with some of those tendencies that all came back to wanting to lose weight as fast as possible. And so the reason I'm so passionate about teaching people the right way to lose weight and the sustainable way to lose weight is because, like you said, I have that integrated experience where I really messed up my gut health, my hormones, my metabolism by trying to lose weight too quickly in an unsustainable and unhealthy way.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then I do resonate with that in terms of the female athlete, because
Mhm.
when I was in pro ball, we would train in the off season. We would train with the Olympic softball players and gymnasts and stuff like that. And our conversations are candid, as pro athletes, and these ladies would, that's interesting. They would speak to that.
Yep.
Although I don't claim to know, much if anything about it. Well, let's take this. Let's role play an example, right? So I'm coming in, I'm your client, and I want to drop pounds because we're coming into the summer months here
Yeah.
shortly. So why do so when we set a goal, in this example, losing 10 pounds, let's say, right? Why do you think, what type of mindset, what type of framework and structure do you set in place at the beginning? Because I work with a lot of folks as well in the performance space, the youth athletes all the way up to the pro, and then a whole lot of like middle-aged folks as well who are looking to pivot and shift into more of a holistic type um, health and wellness, changing their life, right? And I almost view it as like an identity shift in a way,
Yes.
the lifestyle versus the hobby.
Yes.
So can you go and then, like, how we do set these goals? There's really no pinnacle, meaning like there's no end state to the goal, right? So how do you set a client up with um, understanding that it is a lifestyle change? What are some things that you help them with right off the bat to change their perspective on how to approach this?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it starts off with a very transparent conversation with that person. If someone hires me and they tell me I want to lose X amount of pounds by this date, I'm asking them a lot of questions about that. Why this date? What are your expectations around this? What past experience do you have? Because a lot of the people I work with, they've been trying to lose weight for a long time. I mean, they've tried every diet under the sun, and they still can't seem to get themselves in a body that they are healthy in and that they love. So I think that honestly, the first issue we need to address is, why do you have an end date? Because wanting to lose weight for a specific event and wanting to have a sustainable lifestyle approach are basically two separate things. If you really are pushing for an end date, you're probably going to be motivated to take action that is not sustainable. So if you tell me, we're recording this early March, if you're telling me that you have a vacation in May, let's say you only have like, 6 weeks or something like that, and you want to lose 10 pounds by that time, well, that's putting a lot of pressure on yourself and and on me as your coach to try and get results right away. And the reality is, when you do it the right way, you don't get results. The results are backloaded versus front loaded. What I mean by that is, like, I think about it like you're standing at the top of a mountain and you're pushing down this really big rock. Okay. So you're at the top, there's this big rock in front of you. it's going to take a lot of effort to push it and get it rolling. But once it gets rolling, it starts gaining momentum and rolling down that hill, things start going more quickly. That first, I don't know, 4, 6, even 12-week period with a client is getting them to build the habits that are going to allow them to create that momentum later on in life. So if you are fixated on a specific date, I want to lose 30 pounds by my wedding in September, I want to lose 10 pounds by my vacation in early May, you're probably not in the right headspace to want to do this sustainably. And that's not a sexy answer, but that is what any coach worth their salt would tell you.
Yeah, right. Because we can all lose. I mean, especially with AI and ChatGPT, if we want to
Yeah.
drop 10 pounds real quick, we can just stop eating, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do because they just don't know. They don't know. And these marketers too, you walk into a grocery store to talk about nutrition and
Oh my God.
what we put in our body. It's like, man, these subliminal messages as we go up and down the aisles, the box and canned foods and the bright colors and everything else. And all of our food in America is just loaded with sugar.
Yep.
So in terms of nutrition, what are, and everybody's so individual,
Yeah.
but in general, like what are the main things that you say if, we're building a lifestyle? You also mentioned habits and routines, which are crucial. And then that all feeds that one step at a time.
Yeah.
The 1% better, all these popularized terms floating around, especially social media nowadays. It's that positive feedback loop, like that boulder you mentioned, like once you get moving on it, you take that first little baby step, which there's a lot of humility in that. Like, okay,
Yeah.
deep breath, Eric. I know I could do this one little step at a time. There's humility in that, but there's also that positive feedback loop, that momentum. So in terms of nutrition, what are some things that you suggest to people either limiting or completely cutting out right away?
So I take a addition first or an addition first, I guess, approach to weight loss, which is I rather you add more nutritious foods into your diet than try and take the unhealthy foods out. Because if I tell you right now, whatever you do, Eric, do not think about a pink elephant. The only thing you can think about is a pink elephant. So if I have a client who's addicted to sugar and junk food, which most Americans are, and I tell them, listen, Susie, if you're serious about weight loss, you cannot have your Starbucks every day. You cannot have your sweet treats at night while you're watching Netflix. She's going to want those things 10 times more. And so what I rather do is replace that less healthy food with healthier food. So one of the first sort of practical pieces of advice I give to my clients is let's start your day off with a high protein breakfast. Talk about a baby step. That's a perfect baby step. So research shows that eating a breakfast with about 30 to 40 grams of protein in it helps reduce cravings throughout the rest of the day and actually helps helps influence your decisions so you make better decisions later on in the day. Because there's certain sort of mechanisms that signal safety and we have enough to your body. One of them is getting in enough protein and the other is getting in enough healthy fats, specifically omega-3s. So if I can front load that in the beginning of the day and get my clients eating omega-3 fats and protein, they're going to be less likely to have these cravings and things that usually strike at the end of the day. So high protein breakfast, 30 to 40 grams. You could do egg whites and eggs scrambled up with some fruit on the side. You could do, protein pancakes are a popular one, Greek yogurt with fruit, cottage cheese, all sorts of different stuff you can do. But that's one that I really like to give. Another very simple one, have a source of protein and produce at every meal. My assistant coach here at Built by Balance, Lindsay, she calls that eating like a pro. So protein and produce at every meal. Once again, you're going to get your protein in. It's going to keep you full. It's good for your metabolism and your metabolic health. Same thing with fiber. When you're eating produce, you're getting more fiber in. A lot of Americans not getting nearly as much fiber as they need. It's bad for your gut. It's bad for your cognitive function because you've got these blood sugar roller coasters going on all day. So high protein breakfast, eating like a pro. Those are probably my two favorite nutritional guidelines. I am not someone that will make you cut out any one particular food unless we work together and discover that you're intolerant to it or you have an allergy or something like that. But I'm huge, especially coming from my background where I was so restrictive, on letting people include in, a sweet treat here and there, or go get ice cream with their kids or whatever it is. But the majority of the food you eat, about 80 to 90% of your diet, should be made up of whole natural foods, minimally processed foods, things that you can kill or you can gather, right? So animals, animal-based products, fruits, tubers, certain grains like rice are usually pretty good, well tolerated by people. Not as much of the junk food, the brightly colored, brightly packaged stuff that you referred to earlier.
Yeah, and what it sounds like to me is, um, people like to have choice, right?
Yeah.
As soon as as soon as you point your finger at somebody, like you said, don't think of this color elephant. We're going to think of it, and there's resistance too.
Yes.
It's like, don't tell me what to do. I want to do this on my own. I want to feel, I want to have autonomy over my choices, and I want to do it my way, sort of
Yeah.
approach, right? So do you feel like when people start to, when you suggest, like you say, maybe, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but you say, look, if you want to have your ice cream, you can, but start out with a high protein breakfast. Do you feel like, again, those baby steps and momentum, that they self regulate, meaning like after a little bit of time, they start to feel better, especially if they're getting that breakfast. And then on their own, they come to you and say, you know what? I didn't even have the ice cream today.
Yes, that's exactly the whole theory behind what I do. Is it will literally crowd out the BS. Like if I tell you you've got to eat protein and produce at every meal, and I want you to just drink water and coffee as your main two, liquids in the day as your main source of hydration. All of a sudden, if you're eating enough, keeping yourself full, you're not drinking all this soda and stuff like that, there are so many like trickle down effects from that. Like I'm trying to push the biggest domino that's going to make all the other dominoes fall over. So rather than worrying about every little thing, I'm trying to think like, what are the biggest levers I can pull? What's the least amount of work I can do to elicit the most amount of change? And so that's where I come up with some of these kind of like principles of like protein and produce at your meals, high protein breakfast, largely refraining from processed foods. It starts to have a really positive effect. And what's cool is like there are psychological effects and then there are physiological effects. So when people do this, they tend to have more energy. Well, what do you do when you have more energy? You're going to move more. Well, that helps with your caloric burn. And then we go back to that analogy of the boulder, and it's like, oh, this is where it starts to really pick up momentum.
Yeah, love it. And then, so I want to go and I want to segue into two related topics. First, gut health and metabolism. I know that's a major component to this. And then afterwards, let's feather in exercise and the importance, nutrition, exercise, what people think they may need first and most.
Mm-hmm.
But first, our gut is our second brain.
Yeah.
So and then metabolism. Can you go ahead and explain some of that, and how important it is for us to understand?
Yeah, 100%. It's funny. First of all, I am a living, walking, breathing example of this. When I was super restrictive to my diet, put a lot of stress on my body, and that caused me to have gut health issues, which then in turn exacerbated the anxiety and depression I was feeling, which can then in turn make your gut health worse because then you're binging and you're restricting and all sorts of stuff is going on, which was the case for me. Yesterday, I had a client, she's been with us for a couple years. She texted me, she's in school right now. She texted me this paragraph that she's found in, I guess, a book or a textbook. And basically they had researched obese and healthy individuals in terms of weight. And they found that the obese individuals had certain species of bacteria in their gut that were more closely linked to depression and anxiety. So there's literally certain strands of bacteria and different things that are present in the gut of someone who's unhealthy and depressed versus healthy and, of a good mindset or mental state. And, huge part of what influences this is the foods we eat. So these processed foods, high sugar foods, they tend to feed the bad bacteria in the gut. This becomes problematic when the bad bacteria overpopulates or overcrowds the good bacteria. So if there's an imbalance of bad and good bacteria in your gut, this is where you start to get issues like constipation, bloating, really bad gas. And that's a sign that your gut needs love. Now, to go back to the metabolic piece of it, the main thing that controls your metabolism is going to be your thyroid. And if your thyroid's not functioning properly, you're going to have a really hard time, processing the food you're eating, making healthy fats, putting cholesterol where it needs to go in your body. Well, guess where a lot of thyroid hormone is converted into? So there's two forms of thyroid, right? There's T4 and T3. T4 is inactive. It's largely useless in the body. T3 is the active form. Guess where a bunch of that conversion from T4 to T3 happens? It's in your gut. And so if your gut's unhealthy, you're not getting your thyroid in, you're not getting enough thyroid hormone, which can lower your metabolism. They have literally found, they've done these studies where they will do a poop transplant, which sounds gross, but it's really interesting. They will do a transplant, a fecal transplant from an unhealthy individual to a healthy individual or vice versa. And they find that when they do that fecal transplant from a healthy, lean individual into an obese individual, that the obese individual, independent of any dietary changes or anything, so they're not changing their diet, they're not starting to work out, they will lose weight just by having healthier bacteria from that fecal transplant, which is crazy. So that's why it's one of the first things we focus on. And if we go back to the suggestions I gave a few moments ago, eating like a pro, high protein breakfast, getting your fiber in, that's all going to lead to better gut health.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic right there.
I think
Wow.
it's
Okay.
mostly in rodent models, but I'm pretty
Okay.
sure they've successfully translated it into human models as well, which is crazy.
That's wild. That's why. I mean,
Yeah.
what we're talking about here is longevity.
Yeah.
Like how long do we want to live? People, I read an interesting study too. By 2030, 83% of people in the United States will be obese.
Yep.
That's wild. We
That's
have gone away.
insane.
That's wild. That's sad. That's what it is.
It's
I mean,
2025. So you're telling
yeah,
me 5 years from now, I think the current statistics have about 60% of Americans are overweight or obese.
yeah.
So we're talking about another 20% up from that,
Why,
like it's,
why do you think, I mean, yeah, it's really why do you think people walk around miserable? Like they know,
yeah,
see, here's the thing. I mean, I view like most people live through a lens of perception, the way I view the world, right? But that's
yeah,
unilateral and subjective and only valuable to me. But
yeah,
when we shift into perspective and we look around and we pay attention to like that person's overweight, that person's overweight. Just going to a Starbucks, if you take note and you open
yeah,
your eyeballs and you look around and then you look in the mirror and you say, how do I feel? How am I sleeping? Like, do I
yeah,
really have the energy to play with my kids after work? And that answer is usually no. Man, I'm so
yeah,
tired. Like, why do you think people, I mean, you're so busy, you're an influencer too online. You're doing a lot of great things. Why, like, have you, with all the people you've worked with, have you been able to see like a common thread? I'm sure there's an
yeah,
eye-opening moment when you meet
yeah,
people after you explain some stuff to them. They're like, oh man, I'm not like these chronic diseases, the four horsemen, like
yeah,
Peter Attia says in his book Outlive, which is a phenomenal book. It's a strong recommend. Um, these four horsemen, the heart disease and
yeah,
the diabetes and everything else. I mean, we're just walking. We're walking into an early death at say 65 years old.
yeah,
Have you found any like common themes as to
yeah.
why people are so blind?
I'm so happy you brought this up because it's funny. I actually it was not like a planned. So speaking of being an influencer, which I appreciate that. I don't know if I'm an influencer, but I do post a lot online. A lot of my content, I sit down and really think about it and structure it out to make it appealing to people to educate them. Last night, yesterday was a busy call day for me. I had about 3 hours of calls. One to onboard a new client, couple just check-in calls with current clients, and I just sat there at the end of this long block and I just had this like tremendous feeling of gratitude, number one, that these people trust me, but also empathy for these people. Because I think a lot of people are very misunderstood. And it's really easy for someone who has abs, to look around and be like, look at that fat person. They don't take care of themselves. They don't pay attention. They're a, there's a there's a person online that I've heard of or listened to some of his stuff. He calls them a metabolic dumpster fire, which I understand. I get where that's coming from, but I don't know. I have a different view. So to answer your question, it's the way our entire society is structured, which is kind of a big thing to say, and obviously a deep rabbit hole we can dive into. But we've already kind of alluded to our food system being an absolute shit show. Excuse my French, but it is. I
No, it's
mean,
okay.
it's
It is.
horrible. I mean,
Yeah,
our
it's
food
garbage.
is a lot of our food is borderline poisonous, and I
Yeah.
don't say that lightly.
Really?
Then we've got a medical system that takes an approach where it's let's treat you after you're already sick versus preventing sickness from happening. And then on top of that, the popularized, fitness and diet culture advice is trash advice. It's eat less, move more. It's restrict yourself. It's you can't have these foods. And that sends people into this spiral of a binge restrict mentality. So these women I'm talking to, they're deathly afraid of eating a cup of rice with dinner. And then because they're so restricted throughout the day, they eat half a bag of dark chocolate chips at night. And it's like, that is because of the way that they have been taught. That's because of what diet culture tells them. Now, I'll be honest, I take a very, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm huge on being responsible for your own life, controlling your life, and not letting it control you. So I definitely think people do have a responsibility to get themselves in shape, but I also have a tremendous amount of empathy because not a single one of these women that I'm working with are lazy or don't care about their health. In fact, they're obsessed with their health. They're constantly thinking about food. They're constantly thinking about exercise. Some of them go to exercise classes 5 times a week, and yet they're still 30, 40, 50, 60 pounds overweight. That's not on them. The system is broken. And, again, it's up to the individual to learn to listen to podcasts like this and take control. But you can't just look around at people and be like, you're just so blind to everything. It's that they're doing what they've been told, but what they've been told is horrible advice.
Been wrong. Yeah, that food
Yes.
pyramid too. I mean, I
Oh my
view
God.
I mean that could be one of the biggest crimes in American history.
Yeah, it's bad.
That
It's
food
bad.
pyramid.
And you'll have more science-based people in the space, people I really respect, like Dr. Mike Israetel and stuff like that. They'll say that it's largely fine and there's no data to support. I'm sorry. If you walk around 50 to 60% of your diet is grains and you consider meat products to be unhealthy, I guarantee you're not in good shape. I'd bet
Yeah.
my life savings on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt, but I want to
you're good.
get your view on this before I forget, and then we'll move into some exercise. Um, so when we eat a lot of grains, right? So breads,
Yep.
um, any type of pasta, processed foods,
Yeah.
our body has a very difficult time digesting that. And can you go into what our body turns that into?
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's I don't know if it's necessarily as much of a digestive issue because a lot of these grains are actually quick digesting. Like they are digested very quickly. Like you think about, God forbid, if you get really sick and you have food poisoning, what is the diet that's recommended? The brat diet, right? It's like bread, banana, rice, applesauce, toast, or something like that. Those are all foods that are actually pretty easy to digest. The problem is they are metabolized quickly, they spike your blood sugar, and there's nothing to bring your blood sugar back down to a stable level, so it just crashes. So if you've ever been someone to eat a bowl of cereal and drink orange juice in the morning and then you wonder why you feel tired by 10 a.m., it's because you have this massive spike of blood sugar. Well, what goes up must come down, and it comes down, and it's on that crash that you start to feel irritable and moody and fatigued and all that stuff. So if you're constantly spiking your blood sugar, spiking your blood sugar, spiking your blood sugar, eventually your body starts to lose the ability to transport that blood sugar into muscles where it can be stored as glycogen and things of that sort. So you then have this situation where your blood sugar is constantly elevated because it literally, there's too much of it. It becomes desensitized to it in the blood, right? Like if you constantly heard a beeping noise all day long, at first it would annoy you. Eventually you just get used to it. Same thing. If your blood sugar is always really, really high, at first you're going to have that insulin shuttling it around, making sure that it's getting to the right spot and not staying in your bloodstream. Eventually you become what's called insulin resistant. You're not able to shuttle it around efficiently anymore. That's where you have people coming in with starting to develop, high blood sugar and type 2 diabetes. So those foods are more likely to spike your blood sugar. Whereas, like we talked about earlier, the protein and the produce, that's going to, yes, still spike your blood sugar, but not nearly as much. It's not going to go up as high. It's not going to crash down low. It's going to be a lot more stable.
Yeah, and, you said something really important right there, the insulin resistance, and a lot of people don't fully understand that, and I don't think we need to go into that in depth right now, but there is no such thing as a sudden heart attack
Yeah.
and sudden diabetes, right? I mean, now if you have childhood diabetes, honestly, I
Yeah.
don't know too much about that. That's a different type of
It's a different,
conversation.
that's actually type 1 is more of like, they almost classify it as like an autoimmune condition. It's a completely
Okay.
different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. You don't just, all of a sudden you ate a hamburger one day and then you get diabetes or high cholesterol or any of these other kind of looming chronic diseases that are in the background. This is coming from years and years of eating in a particular way.
Right. Yeah. And so wake up, people. That's basically what we're saying right here is like,
Yeah.
because our current healthcare system, you go in when you're already symptomatic
Yes.
and the doctor says, "Oh, if I can't do anything for you right now if you're not symptomatic," right? It's like if you just have a little bit of something going on, um, basically what I'm trying to say is our current healthcare system only treats something that's staring them in the face that they can see and
Yep.
measure.
Mm-hmm.
But this like wellness 3.0 is what we're discussing here. What you specialize in is the prevention through a change of lifestyle and waking up, right?
Yeah.
Because there, I mean, if we want to be, one thing that helped me fully understand this stuff when I was going through my recovery process and all these deep dives into a number of different topics, was fast forwarding my life and saying, how do I want to live the last decade of my life? What do I want to be able to do? Like, do I want to be able to live on my own at 85 years old? Do I want to be able to walk around the neighborhood? Do I want to be able to sit Indian style and get up on my own?
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't think about that when they're in their 20s and 30s and 40s, but maybe 50, they start thinking about it. I'm 45. I started thinking about it. But what it did as a consequence was say, all right, well, if I want those activities to be in my life when I'm that old, I need to start paying attention to what I put in my body and how I exercise and how I move. And right now,
Yeah.
um,
100%.
so how
Yep.
do we? So how do we? So what's your view on exercise?
Yeah.
We have nutrition, key component. We have movement, body movement, cardiovascular wise, and strength wise, muscular wise. What's your view on these? Is it a balancing approach? Is it a balanced approach, or does one weigh more than the other in terms of importance?
Honestly, Eric, I think you could argue it either way. Some people will say, start with exercise, nutrition will follow. I was an in-person trainer when I first started my career, so that was kind of the approach I first took. Other people will say exercise largely doesn't matter. It's more for longevity. It doesn't help that much with weight loss. I think it is a little bit more balanced. If I had to give it like like a pie chart in terms of what's going to make the most difference, I'd say it's probably like 60 to 65% nutrition, and then the remainder, I'm horrible at math, whatever that is, 30 whatever percent. Yeah, too much math for my brain, which is sad, but
Yeah.
and then the remainder is exercise. The way that I see it, if your goal is specifically weight loss, the way that you should exercise or your approach to exercise should be, how can I build and maintain the most amount of muscle possible? So muscle is what we call metabolically expensive tissue. What that means is that it takes a lot of calories to keep muscle on your body. And so what that means is you're literally raising your metabolic rate the more muscle you have on your frame. If you look at bodybuilders, right? If you follow Chris Bumstead or any of these like famous bodybuilders, they have to eat 4, 5, 6,000 calories a day to keep on that amount of muscle. Now, Most people don't want that amount of muscle, so that's not what we're aiming for. But the reason they can eat so many calories is because they have so much muscle on their body. So this is what the average person should be aiming for. You should be aiming to have a good amount of muscle definition. This is what's going to make the guys look nice and buff, fill out their shirts, not have that dad bod, and the females to look toned and look lean and have those nice sculpted arms and that kind of tapered waist. And so I recommend, as just kind of, again, everything we're talking about right now is general. It obviously depends on the individual, but I like about 3 days a week of full body strength training. So you're doing mostly, squat, press, squat movements, hip hinging movements like deadlifts, presses, both overhead and forward. So like chest presses, overhead presses for your shoulders, rows, and then sort of like pull down movements like pull ups or lat pull downs. And then on your off days, just go outside and see the fucking sun. Like go get some
Amen.
sunlight,
Amen. Yeah.
go get some fresh air, put your bare feet in the grass, like relax. We haven't even touched on stress, which is a huge part of it for a lot of people.
And inflammation too.
And inflammation and all of that. Yep, 100%. So go outside, get some sunlight, take some steps. I like a general recommendation of about 8,000 to 10,000 steps per day for most people. So most people, if you wear an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, you look down at the end of a work day when you're sitting at your desk all day, you're probably only getting like 3,500 steps if you're lucky. We want that closer to, like I said, 8 to 10,000. So, start taking a walk a couple minutes after every meal. We talked about blood sugar regulation. One of the best ways to prevent that blood sugar from spiking really high is to take a quick walk after your meals. So that's something I really like. But yeah, in terms of exercise, it should be viewed as something to strengthen your body and boost your metabolism, not as a way of burning calories, which is, I think, a mistake a lot of people make.
Yeah, I read a study from Stephen Kotler from the Flow Research Lab, and he mentioned that leg strength is an indicator of longevity as well. The stronger your legs are, the longer you live. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, they've. I actually wasn't familiar with leg strength, but I know grip strength is a really good indicator of your longevity and your overall health. So there are a lot of really good like coaches that train, high level athletes and stuff like that. They'll test their grip strength before a session to figure out how hard to push their athletes.
Oh, interesting.
Really cool. Yep.
Yeah, that is interesting. So if you have a strong grip, you're on the healthier side.
For sure. Yeah. And I forget what the tool is called. It's maybe like a dynamometer or something like that. But there's you can get one on Amazon to test your grip strength. And you can see, if it's at a healthy level or not. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want to be strong. You talked about wanting to be able to sit, crisscross applesauce on the floor, get up on your own, accord and stuff like that. You need strength for that. You need mobility and you need strength. And the way you're going to gain those two traits is via strength training. So, a lot of people think, let me go sign up for F45 or Orange Theory. Not a huge fan of those classes. They claim to be strength based, but if you're lifting a weight for 50 repetitions, that's not strength. That's basically cardio with weights. So I recommend, like I said, 3 days a week, full body training, with mostly, compound movements like I talked about and straight sets. So not going from exercise to exercise to exercise with no rest, but resting 30, 60, 90 seconds in between your sets. Some people might want to do like an upper lower body split, or some people do what's called the bro split, which is like push pull legs or one body part at a time. But I think for the average individual, if you're listening right now and you're not working out at all, start with full body.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. What kind of foods cause inflammation?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So I think inflammation is a term that's almost like everyone thinks it's a bad thing all the time. It's demonized. Inflammation's a good thing. So the reason you're able to heal is because of inflammation, right? So if you cut your finger, let's say, it gets swollen and inflamed, it's because you're getting blood delivered to that area, nutrients, oxygen, all sorts of stuff to heal. So we do need a certain level of inflammation in our body to keep us healthy. However, most Americans are overly inflamed. And to answer your question, the types of foods that tend to cause inflammation are these highly processed inflammatory foods. So lots of sugar, lots of there's speculation on seed oils, canola oil, vegetable oil, stuff like that. Some people will tell you they're fine. Some people will tell you they're going to kill you and give you cancer. I
Well,
personally,
I mean, that oil thing, that's been spread all
it's
over the internet.
huge right now. I
Yeah.
personally avoid them for the most part, just because I don't think they taste as good. And I much rather have extra virgin olive oil, which is one of the most nutrient dense, healthy foods on the planet. I much rather put that on my food, or avocado oil, or cook with ghee or tallow or something like that. But mostly it's going to be these highly processed foods in excess. So any of these foods eaten in a normal quantity, or not eaten over and over and over again, are fine. If you eat a scoop of ice cream and you're in a caloric deficit, it's not going to inflame you that much. But most people are not in a caloric deficit. They're either maintaining or they're overeating, which is causing them to gain weight. And so when you add on inflammatory foods, lots of like gums and stabilizers and all sorts of crap you find in food, that is what can send your body into this inflammatory state. And you'll notice you're inflamed because your joints hurt, you have trouble sleeping, you've just got a lot of aches and pains, you're puffy. A lot of women will notice, like, I'm just puffy, and it's usually inflammation. So, yeah.
Yeah. Inflammation, at first glance, you might think of a swollen ankle.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about here.
No, we're talking about systemic inflammation. The other thing that contributes to that is stress, chronic stress. So most people are insanely stressed out. Okay. You're constantly running around all day long, taking care of your kids, going to work, driving in traffic, financial stress with everything going on. Then your parents are aging, and there's just all this stuff. And you think to yourself, I'm not that stressed out. Well, yeah, it's not like you, God forbid, like got into a car crash or something that causes this immediate stress, but there's all this like low level chronic stress that people are dealing with. And then instead of actually like addressing it, working through it, journaling, meditation, whatever, we just distract ourselves from it with social media and pornography and whatever it is that we're using.
Alcohol.
Food, alcohol, exactly right. So it's just adding to this inflammation in the body. So that's a huge component of what I work on with my clients, is both getting enough rest. So sleep is a huge thing I hound my clients on, and then managing stress. A lot of times I'll see a client hit a plateau, and they'll be like, what the heck? I don't understand. I'm eating all the food you told me. I'm working out. Why aren't I losing weight? I'm like, well, how's your stress this week? How's your sleep? Because those things can really, halt your progress as well.
Yeah, one thing to help with my stress, and you're spot on with that, is our deep breaths,
Oh yeah.
like
huge.
just like sitting in standing in the grocery store at the checkout line,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be there for 10 minutes or what have you. It's like just 5 slow, deep breaths.
Yep.
Really we're driving in the car, and there's traffic, it's rush hour, and we're getting frustrated because we may be late to our kids' thing.
Yeah.
Or an after work party or whatever it is, and we get antsy and stressed out, and it's like, roll the window down a little bit if it's nice, put on some good music that you like, and just breathe.
Yep, 100%.
Just breathe. People overcomplicate this mindfulness and visualization and meditation and the breath work. I mean, people try to make full careers out of breath work. It's like, look, breathe in as deep as you can, as slow as you can, and exhale as slow as you can, and do that 5 or 6 different times. Yes, I do believe that I know there are different types of breath work because I partake. But if somebody doesn't want to make it, too complicated, because it's things that are new are scary.
Yeah.
And then there's that whole, like, I don't want to do it, or I don't need to do it, that naive approach. But in order for somebody so meal prep helps me quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because I'm active, man. Like I've got 2 little girls, and I'm running a business, and I've got this podcast and a couple other things. And so my days are like this, just like a lot of other people's too. How do you go about helping people meal prep?
Yeah, I like to keep it really, really simple with meal prep. So, first you got to figure out, like, what's the client's scenario, their life situation, like, do they have a family? Do they need to know how to make meals that are going to satisfy their entire family? For that, I really love like sheet pan meals or crock pot meals, right? So if you literally look up sheet pan fajitas, sheet pan Greek lemon chicken, whatever, there's like a million meals that you can make where you
I'm
literally
going to
just,
write that down. I'm going to write
yeah,
sheet pan down.
yeah, you literally just marinate the food or season it, and then you throw it all on a sheet pan in the oven. Now, is it going to taste like a Michelin star meal? No. But is it going to be pretty damn good and also very nutritious? Yes. Same thing with crock pot. There's so much stuff. This week for myself, I meal prepped crock pot teriyaki chicken. So
Yeah.
easy. I just cooked up some chicken in the crock pot. There are quite a few brands that make just pretty solid, ready to go sauces. Like Primal Kitchen is one that I really like. They have a teriyaki sauce. It's delicious. No seed oils, no inflammatory ingredients, like we talked about earlier. Just poured that over, and that's been my meal prep for the week, right? So I think you got to kind of figure out like, okay, what do I need? What are my meals that are really difficult for me to cook? Like I work from home, and I know that's a privilege, so I don't have a hard time scrambling some eggs for myself in the morning or whatever that looks like. But lunch is a hard time for me because I'm in between client calls, podcasts like this, whatever I've got going on for the day. So that's a meal that I meal prep. Same thing with dinner. At the end of a long day, you could not bother me to cook something from scratch. So I meal prep lunch and dinner, and then breakfast is kind of just something I can cook. Maybe you're in a scenario where you're always rushing out the door, so you need to make something for breakfast. So, you're going to do like a high protein frittata that you can make up on Sunday and then freeze and then reheat throughout the week, right? So I think it's knowing which meals you need to meal prep, because I think a lot of people, when they hear that, they get really overwhelmed because they think they need to like prep every single meal and have them in these little perfect little containers and they need to be like Instagram worthy. Like, no, make it easy for yourself. What a lot of my clients do is something I call batch prepping. Well, I didn't come up with this term, but it's called batch prepping, where it's like you just, for example, roast a bunch of chicken in the oven and you don't actually put a ton of stuff on it. I mean, basic salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, whatever. And then you have kind of like an ingredient that you can throw into different things. So maybe one day you want to chop up that chicken and toss on some buffalo sauce and have like a buffalo chicken. Maybe the next day you want to throw together a stir fry and throw on the chicken on top or whatever, right? So batch prepping, I think proteins is a good idea because those tend to take the longest to cook. And then if you're someone who's really busy, I mean, I don't know why like frozen vegetables and fruits are demonized. I cook exclusively frozen vegetables and fruits because they keep in the freezer and they're actually frozen at peak freshness usually. So they actually contain more nutrients sometimes than the fresh versions. So frozen fruits and vegetables are great. Even like frozen potatoes and things like that, you can easily whip up, packets of rice and stuff like that. Like, I think the biggest thing with meal prep is do not overcomplicate it. Do not let yourself get overwhelmed. I'm a firm believer in the fact that overwhelm is a choice. You are letting yourself fall into that perfectionist mindset, all or nothing mentality, when really you can break it down into something simple and digestible for you and your family, and you can make it work for yourself. But that's a choice in your mind.
Yeah, being overwhelmed goes back to not being in control of your habits and routines
Uh-huh.
and not thinking in advance, and not taking responsibility, like you said earlier, for your own life.
Yeah.
Like on Sundays, speaking of meal prep and prepping out the whole week, just and as a whole in general, is we make it kind of a family affair on Sundays.
Yeah. Yeah, I,
And
I love that. I think that's so important. It doesn't even have to be just your meals. It's like you get on the same page with your partner and your kids about, here's what dad's got going on today. I'm going to be late this day. I've got a work dinner or whatever. Mom's got her gym appointment scheduled at this time. So who's going to pick up the kids? What are the kids doing? Do they have soccer? Like, I just think so many families operate out of this place of like just total chaos. And it doesn't have to be that way. It can be like 10 to 15 minutes of just, like you said, getting on the same page. What does this week look like? What are we looking forward to? Where are moments where we're going to have a lot of family time built in? What does that look like? That was something that my mom did an excellent job of. She was like, always had a calendar and it was always, hey, these are the appointments you have this week. When I was younger, it was like, okay, your braces are getting fixed up this day and you've got softball practice on this day. Like, it's important to have that sort of structure because we've, kind of alluded to this a couple times. Like, if you don't run your life will run you. And this trickles into everything we've talked about today. I think this is a huge reason why a lot of people struggle with their health is because they just let themselves get beat down by everything, and they don't ever kind of like pause and try to like gather themselves and actually organize themselves to be in control of what happens versus just being reactionary all the time.
Yeah, because we've been conditioned from childhood upwards to act a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah, act a certain way. We're told what to do, what we cannot do, and we start to become boxed in. And then we have our teachers, our coaches, and then we go to college and we meet our significant other, and before you know it, we have a mortgage and then a kid, and it's
Yep.
like step and repeat. We do the same thing, and then we're 65, and we look back and we say, "Man, I should have done this, 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 and this, but guess what? It's too late. It's
Yep.
too late now, because like you said, and I learned the same thing. Like if you don't choose for yourself, it will be chosen for you.
Yes.
And that's
100%
not,
agree.
and that's not good for anybody.
Yeah. Not a good place to be. I mean, that's
No.
where you start having, um, poor marriage and financial issues and all these other things. Like I said earlier, I'm such a strong believer in like you have got to take control of that. You've got to take personal responsibility. Like I get it. The economy might play a factor, inflation, all this stuff. It's stressful, right? But like what are you going to do about it? You're just going to sit there and bitch and moan about it on Facebook, or are you going to do something in your own life to actually be able to take what control you can? You can't control what the political officials say, and not to make this a political conversation, but like you can't control how people make the laws and the tariffs and all that crap. You can control how you respond to it. And that's why I'm such a huge believer in taking control of your health, because what version of you is going to be able to better respond to stress and the crazy things that life throws at you? Is it going to be the version of you that's tired and achy and feels like crap all the time, or the version of you that's strong and energized and just equipped to deal with stress?
Yeah, you ask yourself, and this is a real question. You have to mean it, but it's a crucial question. How long do I want to live and live healthy, right? There's two type
Yeah.
of there's lifespan and there's health span. How
Yeah.
many years do you want to live your life healthy, which means free from um, disability and disease?
Yep.
Write it
Exactly.
down. Write down what it is that you want to do. Do you want to play with your grandkids when you're
Yeah.
75, and they're growing up? What kind of legacy do you want to live?
Yeah.
How do you want to live your older years, and start taking action on that now? And you can start with these very small steps like we're talking about today.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
what are the top 3 or 4 things if somebody's going to say, I'm ready to take action? What are the first like couple things that come to mind that they can start immediately?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to start my clients out with kind of designing their ideal life. So I'm a huge believer in, I think, meditation, visualization, all that stuff is helpful, but what's going to drive all of that is action. But you are not going to feel motivated if you don't have clarity. So let's get very clear on what that looks like for you. What do you want your body to look like? What do you want to feel like throughout the days? What do you want your relationships to look like? What do you want your finances to look like? Write that all down. So let's create that ideal version of you. And then we understand that you're not going to be able to achieve that stuff if you're operating out of a place of lack of health, right? So I would say if you're someone that already works out, but your nutrition sucks, I would say start with nutrition. If you're someone that eats decently healthy, you listen to this episode and you're like, that's kind of how I eat, but you don't move your body at all, then I would start with your fitness. A lot of people, what they do when they're trying to get themselves in shape is they just keep doing more of what they're already good at, but they're not addressing any of the red flags on the other side. And that's what kind of keeps them stuck. So get clear on what you want in your life. Decide, what do I need to work on most? Kind of the three categories I like to describe to my clients are nutrition, fitness, and then like stress and sleep. Which one is the worst, and how can I start sort of chipping away at that? And then give yourself permission to fail. You're going to fail multiple times on this journey. You're going to eat foods you said you weren't going to eat. You're going to skip the gym one day and feel bad about it. That is part of this process. If you do this the right way, there is no end date. This is just how you start to live the rest of your life. One of the biggest compliments I get, or the proudest moments I have as a coach, is when a client tells me, this is just who I am. Notice that part at the end, who I am. It's an identity shift. You have to decide in this moment, I am shifting my identity. I'm going to become the person that takes walks. I'm going to become the person that eats healthy. I'm going to become the person that prioritizes your sleep. And if you do those things, the weight loss, the, blood sugar numbers going down, cholesterol being healthier, all that stuff is going to come as a side effect.
Love it. Well said. It was great to
Thank
connect
you.
again.
Thank you.
Great to
Yep.
connect
Appreciate it.
again. I think that's a nice piece to end on right there for today.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you again. It was so great to catch up. It's been a little bit. So
Yeah.
let's keep carrying on and doing good work. And I love what you're doing. I'll drop all your information down in the description so people know where to find you.
Awesome.
And we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, everybody. Take care.